Hashtags. I run a little product innovation studio called Proof. We use lean startup and lean UX methods to do product design work. And so my focus is really about digital product design. And you're going to hear that in my perspective. I'm also the New York City program director for Luxor, which is the lean user experience residency. You have Luxor and Janice Frazier, the founder of Luxor, to either blame or thank for coining the phrase lean user experience. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about sort of how we got here. I'm going to step back a little bit from method. And it's actually really interesting that we're in this, giant building built on Ogilvy's business, because as designers, the way we practice our business, we have inherited a business model from the successful firms that came before us, right? And these firms were built on creating a certain kind of design artifact that's very different from the digital product business that many of us find ourselves in today, right? We're, in the old model, we're delivering things that you hand off, they're finished, and you walk away from. So corporate identity systems, newspaper advertisements, even campaigns that run for a while, they're discrete objects, they're things, right, that they stop, right? In software too, we inherited this sort of engineering model from the old world, where you had to figure everything out before you started building the bridge, or the bridge was going to come tumbling down. Okay? When I got my start as a junior product manager in the early days, one of the first jobs I got handed was the job of making the golden master of the floppy disk, right? And that was cool, and it was a big responsibility because if you fucked it up, you duplicated thousands of disks at $1 a pop, and you put them in boxes and you shipped them all over the country, and you were, so you had to get it right, So that kind of creates a different set of process models than where we are today, right? So if you look at a website today like Etsy, right? How many times a day does Etsy build and deploy software? It's what's thousands of times a day. We got Etsy people here.
Yeah, it's like every minute or second or something.
Every minute or second.
Yeah.
Where's the golden master, right? So you guys are pushing software out continuously, right? And if it's bad, you just roll it back, right? It's an amazing recontextualizing of our work from the sort of basic underlying economics of the work that we do. Okay? We buy our apps on app stores. When they're wrong, or when there's something new, we just get a little, red circle that says you've got an update. Okay? So the impact to the way we work is really profound, right? And it means that we can change from, this kind of process where we had to figure it all out in advance and create these deliverables, to one that we can kind of, that model, okay, it has strengths, right? But it has real problems, right? And if we can break down the silos and move away from these big divisions and get into more collaborative processes, right? It brings with it a lot of good things. So this kind of underlying shift in the sort of economic reality of our work, we've started to see these sort of cultural movements emerge to deal with these new conditions, right? So the first one I think that we all saw and dealt with was the agile software development movement, which started to really emerge in the 90s. And I think that there's a lot of really great stuff in here that they got right. This idea of collaboration and continuous embracing of change, right? That continuous change is reality. But there's some things that I think they got wrong too. I think this notion that working software is the measure of progress. This is a very technology-centric definition of our work, right? And it's a movement that came from technologists, and it reflects that. And so the other thing that we've seen design thinking. right? And I think design thinking has some great stuff associated with it, right? Design thinking was, I think, the sort of design community's response to these changing conditions, right? And this idea that we all know, we see embodied in user experience, right? That every decision you make about your offering has an effect on the user experience. So your pricing decisions and your distribution model, and when you charge subscription fees, right? All of that ends up being a design decision. And if it's a design decision, then all the people making those decisions, they should use design methods, right? Well, it's an interesting notion, but I think the language of design thinking has really failed to engage business decision makers, right? And it also divorced craft from the thinking, which I think is a big problem. So in the last couple of years, though, we've seen some really cool stuff coming out of the business community, right? And these guys have talked about it before me. I'm not going to go into it, but Steve Blank talking about getting out of the building. Like Steve Blank he reinvented design research. He's like, there's this cool thing, you get out of the building and you talk to customers. And a lot of designers sort of turned up their noses and said, wait a minute, we've been doing this forever. Like, you didn't invent this. And it's like, okay, so what? Whatever. They're ready for us, okay? And similarly, Eric Ries, I think he really brought all of this stuff together under the lean startup label, and he really energized the business community with this book. And I think there are, again, a lot of reasons to sort of turn our noses up at this thing and say that we've been doing this forever, blah, blah, blah. Don't, right? We have a community of business people who are ready to embrace design methods, right? So, don't walk, run. This is the opportunity. We've always said, if we could find business people who want to engage with us, look what we could do. Well, here they are, okay? So I think that our response now to this movement is this is what Lean UX is. So Janice, who is responsible for this phrase, Janice's definition says, Lean user experience is a principles-driven process for teams, right? So there's this collaboration, right? This sort of fading away of the waterfall. For teams working in situations of extreme uncertainty, okay? That's this notion of continuous change that we get in the digital world, right? And extreme uncertainty is a phrase she's borrowed from Eric Ries, who says that a startup is an organization whose mission is to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty. How are you on time? About halfway. Good. I'm halfway through. Go to luxor.co, luxor.co, and there's a nice long essay about these principles if you want to read about them in detail. I think they nicely describe the sort of key characteristics of lean user experience. But I want to focus on two here. The first one is that design and business and development and the other important functions in your organization, those create one product team. And that's really, really important. I'll talk about that in a second. The other one is that the way we work is that we declare our assumptions, we recognize them as hypotheses, and we test them explicitly. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, if you're a designer and you're working in a room by yourself, you cannot be practicing lean user experience. You can do good work. You can be doing informal UX. You can be doing guerrilla UX. You can be doing whatever you want. But if you're not engaged with a cross-functional team who are equally on board with your process, then you're not doing lean UX. Right? It's an inherently collaborative process, and it's an inherently cross-functional one. Okay? And by the way, by that yardstick, about 40